Hi guys, welcome back to the Big Sew Along. I'm Ginny and we are still in freezing February here in Michigan. In fact, our temperature today is, not that anybody cares but me, at the moment it is 9 degrees Fahrenheit, which I believe is, let's see, negative 23 if you're Celsius. I don't know. And it's cold. That's all I know. In fact, until I turned my camera on, I had a stocking cap on. That's how cold it is. And my heater's way up. Anyways, it's February. What are you gonna do? So this week we have week 2 of our B Mann by Bridget Sew Along, and we are going to be sewing Les Etoiles, which is a very cute tunic-y kind of dress. This is the one I made right here. I made it in, this is a diamond textiles. I don't know if you can see that, but it's, the main body is like a check, and then the sleeves and the cowl are almost like a pinstripe, but it's not really, you can't really even see that it's a pinstripe. Anyways, I'll show you pictures of it finished in a little bit. Before we get that far though, some other things I've been working on. This past week, I made a dress for my local fabric shop for Bmann's for their display. And I made this one, which is Vogue 9112. It's a Marcy Tilton pattern. And I'll show you the line drawings if you can see that. It was, I usually make things that are all, obviously, most of the stuff I make is really pretty simple. But once in a while, it's nice to do something that's a little more challenging. This was a little more challenging only because it had more pieces. There was nothing particularly difficult about it. Obviously, there's no fitting or anything like that. The size was good. I didn't even change the length of it, which I usually do. So, but this was really kind of a fun make. If you haven't tried it yet, I recommend it. I don't have a picture of the one that I made because I did do it as a display for the fabric store, and I gave it to them before I had a chance to take a picture of it. But I'll take a picture of it when I get it back sometime in the future. Also, in pattern land, I almost never buy patterns from the Big Four for a number of different reasons, but mostly they just don't usually appeal to me. A lot of Marcy and Catherine Tilton patterns do. Catherine Breen or Brennan, or however you say her name, she has a few that do. There are a few, but just not a lot. But McCall's was having a big, like a site-wide sale. I think they're now called Sew Something Special or Make Something Special, some weird name like that. Anyways, they had a sale a while, like 2 weeks ago, and I ordered a couple of things. One of them was this one, this new pattern from Vogue. It's Vogue 1701, and I thought that this version here, this short sleeve version here, could be really cool for spring to throw over like a long slip and a pair of my plinka pants or something like that. Really like this. I'll show you the line drawings on the back too. I don't know if I'll ever get around to it, but I thought I'd give it a shot and see. And speaking of new patterns, in case you haven't been paying attention, and obviously I haven't, because I missed a couple. Tina Gibbons' spring mix patterns have been coming out pretty regularly. She has Tia, T-E-A-H. I'll put pictures up here for you. Which I think was the first one, and then Jill, which came out the second, maybe. And then today, just today, she came out with Candy. I just went to her site this morning and downloaded all 3 of those. I was planning on doing some I had some other plans for March, sort of, what's it called, tentative plans. But now I think I might have to switch them all because I really want to make all 3 of these. I don't know if they're going to be good for so long though, because they don't look very complicated, so I don't know that that'll work, but we'll see. I'm gonna I got the patterns this morning. I'll download them and take a look at the pattern pieces and see exactly what's involved in putting them together. And maybe we'll do those for our next sew along as soon as we're done with the B Mann. Speaking of which, just a reminder, today we're doing Les Etoiles. Next week we are doing the flower drum pants. Yeah, I think that's it for news. Anyways, so there's not a lot to say, again, because it's a simple pattern. There isn't a lot to say about the Les Etoiles dress. There are pattern pieces for a front, a back, sleeves, a cowl, and pockets. The band on the bottom, you measure the hemline of your dress when you get it all together, and then you make a band according to that measurement. So there's no pattern piece for that. Nothing particularly difficult in terms of sewing this. I will say it's really important to remember that your cowl needs to go on backwards, kind of, because it folds out towards the front. Anyways, I'm going to send you on over to the sew along, and we'll come back and discuss some more when it's finished. We're going to start with our pockets here. So our instructions say to put 2 small pleats in the center of your pocket. I actually misread that, so I only put 1. It's not going to make any difference. The pocket piece looks like this. All I did was fold it in half, and you can make your pleat as big or as small as you want. I folded it in half, and I sewed a line of stitching a 1/2 inch away from the fold, and I only sewed it about a 1/2 inch down. It doesn't need to be far, just needs to be able to hold that pleat together. And then I pressed that pleat flat on the back side, and I basted it over the front edge like this, so it's going to stay in place while we put our binding on. So I'm going to do the binding a little bit differently than she tells you to in the instructions. My binding pieces are 1.5 inches wide, and I have folded one of the edges under 1/4 inch. Then I just sewed the non-folded edge right to the top of my pocket, so it looks like that. I sewed it to the top and pressed all of that up towards the top. Now, I have a lot of extra here. I'm just going to cut that right off. And I'm also going to trim this off, our seam allowance off. I'm just going to trim it down to about half of what it is right now. So now we have something that looks like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this face up, and I'm just going to fold my bias tape towards the front. So I'm having this folded edge here go just past our seam line here, like that. So it's just covering that seam. And then I'm just going to put a little pin in here, just like this. And we do the same thing on this side. And now I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I am going to sew this down right here, 3/8 inch away from our edge, because it's a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to sew my seam right here. I'm going to sew that at 3/8 inch, and then I am going to change my stitch width to stitch length to the largest, to a basting stitch, and I'm going to baste this around at 3/8 inch all the way around. And then when I get back up here, I'm going to change it back to a regular stitch. I'm going to back tack again and sew that shut at my 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now we should have something that looks kind of like this. This is the front. This bias tape is folded to the front and stitched down here, and I don't know if you can see that, but my basting stitches go all the way around the edge there. Then we're just going to trim these corners. And we're going to flip this to the back. And I'm going to use my scissors, but you should really use something not as pointy. I just left my point turner in the other room. So we're going to push those out like that. So they're nice and pointy. Then you'll see that this stitching line, the reason we put this basting stitch in here is because when you go to the iron, your fabric is going to want to fold right on that line, and it just makes it really easy to get a nice even line all the way around. So you're just going to press all of that down, and it will look hopefully something like that. Even the corners, if you use that basting stitch as a guide, it's just really easy to fold those down. Now we just need to get this piece sewn down, and we're going to do our stitch in the ditch again. And just in case you're not clear, a stitch in the ditch just means that you're going to stitch this place, this seam on the front. That's called the ditch. So you're just going to go right in there and stitch all the way across this. When you do that, you're going to be catching the back side of your little pocket facing. When I do a stitch in the ditch, I usually use an open toe foot. There is such a thing as a stitch in the ditch foot. I prefer to use the open toe foot and just go a little slow so I can see exactly where my needle is going. And it takes a little bit of practice, but that is, for me anyway, the easiest way to do it and the most accurate way. All right, so once you get this stitch in the ditch done and your edges are all pressed under, we'll move on. Your pockets are finished. The next thing we're going to do is put our pockets on our dress. And let's see, I don't know if you can see this. These are the I have straight pins here that are the marks for my pocket placement. And just so you know, like if you put your pocket pattern piece on here, it is exactly right. But we've already hemmed the edges of this more or less, so it's just going to be a little bit smaller than that. I just don't want you to try to like make it fit, because it's not going to fit. Just place your pocket. You can either line it up with one or the other. I don't think it's really going to make that much difference. In fact, I think I'll do that. I think I'm going to line mine up with that center one. And it is at a slight angle. And I'm just going to pin this down all the way around. Make sure you get that folded under right on your edge. You don't want any of that sticking out. I forgot to tell you guys this too. On these pockets, if you're having trouble getting this curve to fold under, let me get this out of the way. If you're having trouble getting this curve to fold under, just grab one of the threads from your basting stitch and give it a little pull, and that will make that folded edge curve under really nicely for you too, and it'll be easier to sew that down. All right, so back to our pockets. Let's get these on here. Once I get this pinned on here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the other one on, and try to remember where you place your pocket. If you place it towards the center pin, you want to place the other one towards the center pin. It would be just like me to not do that. So right here. And then we're just going to edge stitch these on. So you're going to sew along the folded edge of your pocket just as close as you can all the way around the pocket. The next thing we're going to do after we get these pockets on is just put our back and front together and sew our shoulder seams. So the next thing we're going to do is put our sleeve in. And this pattern does not have a notch or anything at the top of the sleeve, but I put one there, and I feel like you're going to want that. It's going to be a lot easier to get your sleeve in properly. So that's my sleeve right side up. And now I'm going to take my dress and place it right side down on top of that. And I'm going to match that notch up, the notch we just made. I'm going to match that up with my seam. And your seam allowance back here can be a little deceiving, so make sure you're matching that up to your actual seam. I'm just going to pin that in there like that. And then I'm going to move this around, and I'm just going to pin this corner together over here, the underarm. Just like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to pin the two underarms, the underarm of the dress and the underarm of the sleeve together. Then I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to put this piece, this right here is going to go under my presser foot. And I'm going to slowly start sewing at my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And as I go, I have my hand in between these two pieces, right? That's my presser foot. And I'm just going to slowly sew, and as I sew, I'm going to pull the sleeve piece down to match the edge of my dress piece. And if the sleeves fit, then you won't have any problem with that fitting right in there. And you can also feel, while you're doing that, you can feel whether or not you've got like a wrinkle or anything in here. Just go slowly, and so that then just continue the whole way. Obviously when you get to the pin up here, you're going to take that out, and then you're going to do the same thing along this side. Just make sure you're not catching anything else. You're just going to put your hand between the two pieces and sort of gently pull this one back so that it meets the dress piece. It's sort of hard to do without my presser foot, but you'll get the idea once you get it. Okay, that is our sleeve sewn in and serged and pressed. Then the next thing we have to do is just these side seams. And let's see, I should probably do this. There we go. So you can see this is our side seam. We're just going to place front and back together and sew all the way from the hem here around to the bottom of the sleeve. And then you're going to finish that seam however you want and press that towards the back as well. And then we're going to move on to our cowl. The next thing we need to do is get our cowl together. Now the instructions say to take your cowl and pin it on to determine the width, the length around of your cowl. But I think, for me, I think it's easier just to measure from the center front on the edge of my ruler, just like this. You want to be about 3/8 of an inch from the raw edge, and just measure. That's the front edge, and that measures 6. It looks like 6 3/8. And now I'm going to measure the back neckline in the same way, at about 3/8 of an inch from the edge. And that one measures, it looks like exactly 6. So half of this from here around to the back is 12 3/8 inches. So I'm just going to take my cowl, and I have right sides together here, and I am going to measure 12 3/8 inches from the fold over. And that is right there. Now, before I cut this off, I'm going to go sew this seam at 12 3/8, just straight down. And then I'm just going to double check to make sure it fits the neck of my dress before I go any further. Here's our cowl finished. We have the seam sewn and the edge finished, and it's pressed to one side. Now, to get this into our dress, we're going to take our dress and turn it inside out. Now we're going to take our cowls also inside out. This straight edge is the one that gets attached to your dress. This one down here, we'll deal with the curved edge, we'll deal with later. But right now we want this up, wrong side out. We're going to shove this into our dress. And this is the center front. Put it inside. And we're going to pin it in. This is our center back. Now you should have, when you put this in, this is the right side of your dress, and it's got the wrong side of the cowl facing it. So you're putting the wrong side of the cowl to the right side of your dress. The seam goes at the center back. And I have marks on my cowl and my dress for center front and center back, so that should be easy to line up. Just going to finish pinning this in here. Once we get this pinned in, we're going to sew it on, and we're going to finish this seam. This is what our cowl looks like now. This is actually the wrong side of the cowl, the right side of our dress. So when we're finished, this is going to fold over this way and lay like that. Now, on this seam here, I press mine towards my dress and I top stitch it down. You can do that or you don't have to. Just press it one direction or the other so it lays flat, and top stitch it or don't, as you choose. For the cowl neck now, all we really have to do is fold this over 1/4 inch and press, fold it over another 1/4 inch and press, and stitch it down, and then your cowl will be finished. And your seam, when your dress is right side out and your cowl is up like this, your seam should be exposed on that cowl. When you fold it over, it'll look like that. Okay, so now we're going to put some pleats in the bottom of our dress, and the instructions say 4 pleats on each side on the front panel, and she says she puts hers about 4.5 inches in from the side, and so that would be right about, let's say it's right there. And she says she uses about 1/2 inch pleat. Now you can use a 1/2 inch pleat, or you can use a 1 inch pleat, and you can start it at 4.5 inches, or you can start it at in the middle. You can put the pleats wherever you want, and you can also make them deeper or narrower also as you like. Just be sure that they're not backing up on top of each other. You want them to be separate. So that's about 1/2 inch right there. So that's going to be one of our pleats. And then let's put the other one right about here. That's 2. That'll be 3 right there. And then one more. Let's do right about there. So on these, I am going to stitch these down this way. Put a stitch right here, just at the bottom, and like 1/2 inch, just to hold them in place. And then I'm going to press them all one direction, which will probably be towards the back, and I'm going to baste across the edge. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Our pleats now look like this. And now, because we put pleats in the front and not in the back, our dress is going to be narrower in the front than in the back. For our bottom bands, we're going to do the same thing we did around the collar. We're just going to place our tape measure about 3/8 inch up from the bottom. And we're going to measure from one seam to the other, all the way across. And on mine, my front measurement is 32.5 inches. And then I flipped it over and did the same thing on the back. And that is 40 1/4 inches. So we're going to cut our hem bands. They are going to be 5 inches wide by the lengths we just measured, plus a 3/8 inch seam allowance on either end. So this one is my larger one. It needs to be 40 1/4 inches, which would be 40 1/4. It's right here. Now, our seam allowances are 3/8 of an inch times 2 is 3/4 of an inch. So if we just add 3/4 of an inch to this, we should be good. So that is one side. This is my larger one. It's the for the back. And then we're going to measure the one for the front, which needs to be 5 inches wide by 32 1/2. There is 32 1/2 plus 3/4 of an inch for our 2 seam allowances makes it 33 1/4, and we'll cut that one off there. And we'll go sew these 2 bands together, right sides together, 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides, finish those seams and press them towards the back. Now our bottom bands should look like this. You can see there's a seam there and a seam there. And all we're going to do with this, we're going to go back to our dress. I'm going to turn my dress upside down here. And just remember that the front is going to be narrower. So find the center of your front. And I really should have marked that. Okay, so there's the center front, and we're going to place that right sides together with the center front of our dress. And then these seams should really match up with the seams of our dress, if we've measured correctly. And then you should have a mark at your center back, and hopefully you marked the center back of your band, which I did not do. You can see I put some funky patches on my dress because apparently there were some cuts in my fabric that I wasn't aware of when I was cutting it out, and so there were splits in the bottom of my dress. Anyway, all right, so now we've got this sort of on here, and you're just going to finish pinning this on. Once you got this band pinned on here, you're going to sew that together with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you're going to press it, I would press it up, but you can press it any way you want. And then also, if you want, you can top stitch that so the seam allowance doesn't flop around inside. Once you've got that band attached, all you're going to do, it's going to look something like this, and all you're going to do is fold this up 1/4 of an inch, and then either 1/4 of a half or a half, however big you want your hem. You're going to hem that like that, and just stitch it down. And the very last thing you're going to do is a hem on the sleeves, and again, just fold it under 1/4 of an inch, and then another 1/4 of an inch. Or if you need it to be shorter, you can make it a little bit, you can fold it up 1/2 an inch. And stitch those down. And there you have your Les Etoiles dress. Okay guys, so that's the Les Etoiles by B Mann by Bridget. I really like this dress. I think it's super cute. It's a fun make. I love the cowl. I have to say I really like the cowl. And she's done this thing where she's actually shaped the cowl. A lot of times when you get a cowl neck, it's really literally just a tube. Hers is like got a bigger curve in the front, and it's flat in the back or something like that. You'll see when you print it out. I really like that. I like the way it lays on the dress. I don't think 3/8 inch seam allowances, in case I didn't say that before. There are a couple of things that you just need to be aware of. The pleat in the pocket and the pleat on the dress are not marked on the patterns. You just sort of make those up. And you saw in the tutorial how I did that. But just know going in that those are things you're just going to have to sort of sort out once you get there. The only thing I would change about this pattern is, I don't know if you can even tell in the pictures, the armholes are a little deep for me. And it sounds counterintuitive, but if the deeper your armholes are, the less movement you have in your actual arm, the more restricting it is. So the closer the bottom of the armhole is to your actual armpit, the more movement you're actually going to get in your arm. When I make this again, and I will surely make it again because it's really cute, I'm just going to raise that underarm an inch. I'm not going to change anything else. Like, I don't want to raise it from the shoulder because the neckline is really good and the bust and everything is good. A lot of times, if you have a lower armhole like that, you'll feel it when you put it on, and you'll mistake that for not enough room in the bust or not enough room in the center back, when really it's usually because the armhole's just sitting a little bit too low. So this one, like I said, I'm just going to raise the armhole about an inch, and I think it'll be perfect. It's really, and if you have bigger arms, or in fact a bigger bust, that might not even be an issue for you. It probably also wouldn't be an issue if you're taller. As I've said before, I'm 5'3" and a half, which we never like to forget. And I have a shorter torso. Excuse me. So, yeah, so I'm shorter. That armhole might be fine for a lot of people. I think that is it for today, guys. I will be back next week when we will be sewing week 3 of our 3-week-long B Mann by Bridget sew along, and we will be sewing the flower drum pants. I will link those below. I will also link to her shop, just her whole shop below. And what else? I'll leave a link below to Tina's new patterns too, in case you want to check those out if you haven't seen those yet. Okay? Alright guys, thanks so much. Have a great week. Happy sewing, and wherever you are. I was going to say stay warm, but not everybody's in the freezing cold. So I will see you next week. Bye.